First of all, just thank you for coming in here today and making time to do this. I've been kind of looking forward to this, and I know a lot of people in this community respect you and just your life and what you mean to them. So I'm just excited for what you mean to me, but just getting to talk with you a little bit today.
Okay.
So thank you so much for coming in. But today is a pretty important day.
Yeah.
In our history, it's 4th of July, and what that means, not only for our country, but even for the world, Independence Day and all the things that go along with it, the celebrations, but also the remembrance, of the past. And, you've gotten to see and be a part of a lot of American history.
Yes.
And a lot of things that have maybe changed over the years. In your mind, what do you see as something that is significant about America and its founding and why we celebrate and remember this day?
Well, in the founding of it, I believe it was God-inspired. I believe God inspired these people to come to this country seeking religious freedom. And the leaders that came with them, after a while decided they needed to be separated from England, as you well know. And Thomas Jefferson, with the help of others, wrote out the Declaration of Independence, which I memorized in school. When in the course of human events becomes necessary for one people to dissolve the political bands that connect them with another, and assuming among the nations of the earth the separate but equal status that will mark them as a nation. Foremost, we hold these truths to be self-evident, that all men are created equal, that they're endowed by their Creator with certain inalienable rights, that among these are life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. And to secure these rights, government is instituted among men. And then it goes on to tell about the great problems with King George, and they were declaring them independent. So anyway, I've always respected that. And in school, I went to in East Texas, we recited that, and I was assigned to recite the Declaration of Independence, and I still remember most of it. So this country means a whole lot to me.
Mm-hmm. What do you think maybe has maybe changed over your lifetime that you've maybe noticed about America? I'm sure you've experienced a lot of change from when you were a boy to, even nowadays. But, we kind of uphold ideas, freedom, liberty, pursuit of happiness, these type of ideals that we as a collective people have said, hey, these are something that should be held in high regard, not only because we think so, but because these are kind of God-ordained type of things that because we are humans, we should treat each other this way. Have you noticed any significance throughout the years of maybe, I don't know, things? I'm sure things are probably not like what they used to be.
No, they're not. And we're in a constant state of change, I would say the things that bother me more is we've left God out of our social life, out of our schools, and a lot of times out of our home. I went to school in a little country school up near an old Indian reservation in East Texas called Peachtree Village. And every morning our teachers start off with a verse of scripture and prayer, and we'd stand and say the Pledge of Allegiance. It was just a common thing everybody did. I don't see that happening anymore. They don't do that anymore. And I think that was the beginning of, in the 1960s, in my view, is when the culture started to change. And now this country has sort of drifted away from the Lord, and I think to our own peril. And, I wish there was a way to get us back to it, where we honored the Lord and served Him through His churches and through our communities.
Do you think anything has to do with? I mean, obviously, a part of our history is that we, during that time period, we experienced a lot of wars, World War I, World War II, and
Yes.
Korean War,
Yes.
which you served in. And so the 60s kind of starts, right when you get back
Yeah.
from that. What was that like as somebody growing up in America as a young man, probably having a lot of dreams and goals and aspirations, and then the Korean War is going on, and you find yourself in the thick of it. What is that like for you as a young man trying to process that?
Well, like I said, we live in an isolated place on farms. And so I grew up in a farming community. A mile down the road was one farm. About a half a mile down the road the other way was a farm. So I knew all those farmers and their kids and went to school with them. But I was a young man and went to Beaumont. I wanted to go to Lamar University, but my dad developed cancer and I had to leave, go back to the farm. All my brothers and sisters had already left. I was one of 11 children, and I was the youngest boy, so I stayed on the farm while my daddy was ill. And then I met my wife in Beaumont and married. We moved to Sweeney and heard a job about Phillips, and so I went to work for Phillips then instead of going to school. Then Uncle Sam called me. And,
what were you doing at Phillips before that?
I was in a utility, water treatment, electrical, running generators, steam boilers, and things like that. And when I went into service, I went to Paso Robles, California, to Camp Roberts and took basic training, and then went to Japan, to Tokyo, and went to a school, chemical, biological, radiological warfare school. If you remember, we dropped the atomic bomb on Japan.
Right.
This was 5 years later, and everyone was afraid of the radiation and stuff like that. So I went to a radiation school and poison gas school and this type of thing. And then I caught a destroyer at Sasebo, Japan, and went to Incheon. That's a port town of Korea. And amongst a lot of people, a lot of soldiers. And I never will forget boarding that ship to go overseas. We were all wondering what's going to happen to us, where we were going. And there at the dockside waiting to get on the ship, there was a little wooden shack and some ladies messing around in there giving coffee and donuts. It wasn't the Red Cross. It was a group of women called the Gray Ladies. They were all elderly people.
Okay.
One little lady had a bun haircut and a hairdo and granny glasses. She come up to me and said, "Soldier, you look like you need a hug." I said, "Yes, ma'am. I come from a hugging family." And she gave me coffee and a donut. Well, anyway, I got on the ship and was gone 22 months. Went to Tokyo and then went to Incheon, Busan, Japan, Korea, and joined my outfit. It was an infantry company, a combat engineer, not combat engineer, but a regular combat soldier. A rifleman was my MOS. And I stayed in a camp there where all these soldiers met and stayed until they were assigned out to different units. And I grew up there one night. We left about midnight on 4 Army trucks, some of us. And it was wintertime, and the roads were icy, and we went up and down them mountain roads, no lights. We went under blackout. And all I could see out the back of this canvas-covered truck was the flashes of light, like lightning. For just a moment you could see, when the lightning flashed, you can see something.
Right.
And that's the way these artillery shells were. The ground was shaking and rumbling. And we were all afraid, to be honest with you. Where we're going, what's going to happen.
Right.
And finally the trucks rumbled to a stop. And an officer come out and says, "Get out and fix your bayonets. They're trying to overrun us." And that was the beginning of my becoming a man, a defining moment in my life. Well, anyway, I served there, and we moved around on the front. We were called a fire brigade. Some company would get in trouble up on the front, being overrun. We'd run over there and help them, and back and forth. And so I spent that time doing that. And then one day a runner come up to the front and said, "Sarge, the war's over." And I said, "Oh, thank God, I'll get to go home." Mm. I was over there longer than I was married.
Oh, my goodness.
So I said, "My wife's not going to know me now. I'm not the same person." Had some neat experiences while I was over there. It was all not bad. Mm-hmm. I remember a special Christmas. My outfit had pulled back from the front to get new men and supplies. And my company commander told me, he says, "Lott, get a squad of men and go down to a landfill about 2 miles back behind the line." And they dumped surplus military equipment in there, torn up, destroyed. And I took a crew of people, and we went down there and dumped this stuff over in this big trench about 100 foot long and about 8, 9 foot deep and about 20 foot wide, where different outfits would dump stuff over, and kind of like a garbage dump, only it was used military equipment. And I looked down in there and I saw some boxes and some kids in them. But anyway, there was 3 girls and 4 boys. And one boy had his little brother on in a gunny sack on his back. And every time anybody would dump anything over in there, they would scramble out of them boxes to see if there was a cracker or a piece of orange or something to eat. And then one of the men with me said, "Sarge, tomorrow's Christmas." I said, "Get them kids out of there." And he got them out. They had rags around their feet. I guess the oldest girl was about 11. And we put them in the trucks and took them back to camp. They said, "You can't do this." I said, "Well, we are." And I went and told the company commander, and he said, "Well, you're not supposed to do that. But we've got a call. We've got to move out tomorrow afternoon. So they can stay the night, but you've got to take them back." Well, we decided we'd have Christmas for them. We'd begin to get packages from home, cookies and different things. And one guy found a little branch, and we pinned it up against the tent, and we put little ornaments on it that come with these packages from home. These little kids were just big-eyed, you know. And we went down to the supply and got some sleeping bags for them, dirt floor in this tent. And we fed them. I got word out to the company that bringing the surplus food down here. And we had little presents we'd give them, you know, but they were just looking at us and didn't know what to think. We got a heater and put in there and got them warmed up. And one of my guys said, "You know, it's not Christmas." I said, "Tomorrow's Christmas." I said, "Not right. It don't seem like Christmas. We don't sing songs." So we started singing songs, "Joy to the World," you know, others, thinking about home. And those little old kids were just big-eyed looking at us, you know. When we got through singing, they started singing in Korea.
Really?
I had no idea what they were saying.
Oh, my goodness.
Anyway,
they probably didn't know what you were singing either, huh?
No, it didn't. Anyway, they got a good night's sleep, and the next morning I had to take them back and dump them out in that dump. That was one of the hardest things I ever had to do. And I don't know what happened to them later. But anyway, the war was over, and I came home on the ship, same ship that I went over on. And I noticed I'd pulled in the dock at San Francisco. There was this little shack. And these gray ladies were going in and out, giving coffee. And this little lady that had the bun haircut and the granny glasses, I saw her. And I walked up to her and I said, "Ma'am, do you remember me?" She said, "I remember all my boys."
Oh.
And I began to kind of cry. She said, "You're home now, soldier." And anyway, I came back to my wife, and we picked up our life there, and I had a lot of problems readjusting.
Yeah. So how long were you gone?
22 months.
It's almost 2 years.
Yeah, I was married 18 when I went. 18 months.
And that must have been really hard for her.
Sure it was. She went back to Alabama, stayed with her mother. Her mother, while she was there, her mother and daddy divorced. So she stayed with her dad. Her two sisters went with the mother. Anyway, we wanted to have children, and we're not able to do that. Went to doctors and so forth. They said, "You might as well try adoption." So we put in our request at various orphanages, and we have wound up adopting 3 kids. All mine are adopted. Adopted a little girl and a little boy. We're twins. And that's the one that sits in the church with me now, the black-headed one, Leslie. And her brother lives out here on County Road 809. He's not able to work. A tree fell on him, and he's not invalid, but he can't hold a job. And then Becky, we got her when she was 30 or 4 hours old out of Houston Hospital. And it's been a wonderful time. I was raised in a Christian home. My mother and dad were Christians. My dad never owned an automobile. We went where we went in a wagon with mules. And about 3 miles to church from our house, and we went across the fields and the creeks, and anyway, I was raised up that way, and my daddy was always helping people, and I guess I got the idea of public service from him, so that's what my life consists of.
Kind of saw it firsthand.
Yes, and my mother wanted me to be a preacher. She said, "Son, I've dedicated you to the Lord." I remember going to a big prayer meeting one time, and they had a lot of pastors there. Not a lot, but several. All the preachers stand up. I was 7 years old, and I stood up.
Oh, my goodness. You were ready from a young age, huh?
Yeah, but really, I didn't feel the Lord calling me to be a pastor. But later on in life, I always had a feeling for older people. And I've lived here since 1951.
Was that before or after? That was before you left.
I've lived here before, but when I come back, it was 56.
Okay.
And at the time I'm talking about, 1956, they were just building this church.
Oh, okay.
The little white building over on the corner is gone. It's where I went a couple of times. When I came back, this church was built. I wasn't particularly interested in church, even though I was raised in a church. My wife was, so she'd go, and I said, "Well, I'll go with you." And on October the 7th, 1957, we had opera seats in the church then instead of the pews. And that preacher, Andy Pate, was preaching directly to me, I believe. And I felt the call of God in my life at that time. And I went down and greeted him and told him I wanted the Lord to save me, you know. And I looked around, my wife was behind me. She had made a profession of faith. Her grandfather was a Baptist preacher in Alabama, but she'd never been baptized. So we were both baptized the same night.
Wow.
Here in his church.
Wow.
And then later on we adopted our children. And I got an opportunity to come to Swaney. I was already lived here, to be city manager. And I became city manager in '66. and retired in the 90s.
Wow.
Stayed here during that time.
So you really got to set your roots down here then
Yes,
when you came back.
I had chances to move to other cities, but I decided that this is a place to put roots down.
So how did this church, when you came back here and you and your wife were baptized here, and I've heard of Andy Pate before here from this church, different members, did he play a pretty integral role in helping you along when you got back from the war and getting involved in a call to ministering? And
Yes, he helped me. My dad, like I said, had been sick for years. He had a big growth on his side. And when I became a Christian, I asked the Lord to heal my daddy. I said, if you will heal my dad, I'll serve you all my life. And, of course, my dad was getting sicker and sicker. Mm. And I talked to Brother Pate about that. He said, Kenneth, you're trying to bargain with the Lord. I said, you can't do that. Mm-hmm. So I put that out of my mind. But my daddy then, they later had surgery, and they lived another 8 years. So then I've always wanted to visit with older people. Mm-hmm. And a lady I knew that was a nurse in Angleton, she started a hospice, Helping Hands and Heart. Mm. And she said, would you be our chaplain? So I went to chaplain school through Methodist Hospital in Houston. And I became their chaplain in 1997 and stayed till 2017. We closed it down.
Right.
And during that 20 years with them, I visited patients all over. Mm. I think a little over 200, and did about 60 funerals for them. And then we closed it down, and the head chaplain at the hospital, Lake Jackson, asked me to come in as an associate chaplain there. So I started there, and I just ended it about 2 or 3 months ago. Mm-hmm. I was there 4.5 years. Visiting people in the hospital.
Right, and that's a special kind of ministry.
Yes.
And a lot of people
different from hospice.
Yes, and even just ministry in general. People see the church and they connect it with, sermons and music and Bible studies or prayer and even weddings or funerals. But the visitation part, there's something special about coming to somebody in their need. Nobody wants to be seen lying up in a bed, not able to be who they are. But to come to people in that moment and to let them know that they're loved and cared for and prayed for,
yes,
is really kind of an invaluable thing that we need to, I think, as people, not forget, because it's so easy to get caught up in our own life, and
yes,
we go to work, we got families, we got responsibilities, and someone's sick or down, or I just had a procedure or whatever it may be, or maybe it's somebody in their last days, maybe on hospice, and but just for somebody to take a moment out of their day, an hour or 30 minutes out of their schedule to go by and see somebody. Man, I've had some powerful experiences doing that and just saying, God, if this is how you want to use me, use me. Yes. I feel like that's one of the things when they go to schools and they ask kids, well, what do you want to be when you grow up? That's probably not one of the things on there, But I feel like God uses certain people like you and many other pastors and ministers across the world in that moment, and maybe just speak a little bit to some special things that you've witnessed or seen in those rooms visiting with those patients.
Well, I mentioned the other night, Gerald was talking about his wife, Jan, and she was a hospice nurse. And one night I got a call. I always went out when they were dying. I visited people at least once a week. Sometimes they'd live 3 or 4 months. And sometimes a couple of days, you never know. And I remember very well her commitment to the elderly people. She called me from Wild Peach, and I was asleep, and she said, Kenneth, this patient out here that I just seen the day before is dying. And I got up and got dressed and went out there. And she was lying down on a bed with this lady, elder lady, holding her close, you know. And we had prayer, and that lady died while I was there. And to me, that was one of the most touching times when a nurse was doing that to this old lady, elder lady. I've seen at times when a woman told me that she had two brothers. She was a hospice patient. And she said, my daddy never said he loved me. Said he would always talk about his two boys, but he never told me one time in his life he loved you. That when I had an opportunity to say, well, God loves you, and I love you in the Lord, you know. I've had opportunities to lead people to Christ that way.
Right.
Most of them, I have to say, are Christian. But every once in a while you run across, I don't believe in that stuff, you know. And I wouldn't press myself. I'd just be there, pray for them. And it was quite an experience. I wouldn't take anything for it, but I wouldn't give a dime to do it all over again.
No, I know. And I've gotten to hear a lot of these, conversations that you've had with patients and people over the years. And one of the things that I've learned from you as well is that you would come in on a Sunday night or something, and we'd be talking before Bible study, and you would say, "Well, I went to go visit, somebody," and you would make a comment about pray for him. He's not religious, doesn't want to talk about God or the Bible, but you'd always say that you would come to them and they would say, "Well, I don't want no preacher or nothing," and you'd say, "Well, what about a friend?"
That's right.
And everybody would take a friend, and so you would come and you would sit there and you would just talk with them,
Right.
And because especially when you're down and out, you last thing you want is somebody with some sort of hidden agenda coming to you. You don't want a salesman knocking on your door,
No.
when you're not feeling well. And I feel like sometimes that's the reputation that Christians may get whenever they are going to people in need or something like that. But really, we, as believers, we want people to know that they're loved and that they're cared for. And a lot of them don't have family that are there to do that for them.
Yeah.
And we see, all throughout history and even in the Bible that's what Christians were called to do, to care for the least of these, and to those that are kind of down on their luck or having hard times or difficulties. You look at all the hospitals and they're kind of named after different denominations, for Christians that have started these institutions. And it's such a service. We make a big deal about proclaiming and professing and believing in Jesus. But man, when you put feet to your faith and you say, well, I say this and I believe that, but I'm going to go and spend time with somebody that has nothing to offer me.
Yeah.
But I simply, even if they don't want me there, and I know they need a friend or somebody, and just to do that, and that's been an amazing thing for me to get to just talk with you about that over the years. And how have you, I'm curious about, as you've gotten into your elder years of life, still been able to, until recently, maintain that ability, that motivation to go. I'm sure it'd be very easy for you to say, well, I did my time. Why not let somebody else do that? But you going until you've been physically, having some challenges to do that. What has been a motivation for you with that?
Well, I was brought up as a giving family. We were poor in money, but rich in faith. And I remember my mother was probably the finest Christian lady I ever knew. She had friends over to visit, put a quilt on the front porch, and they'd all kneel around her and pray. In one particular instance, I remember about putting feet to faith. Like I said, we had a big family, and it was poor times. We didn't have electricity till I was 8 or 9 years old in the house. And we depended on raising the food that we ate. And my dad come in one morning and said, I think that old sow's got those little pigs who's not going to make it. She's laying down there by the creek bank, and they're trying to nurse, and she's just ribbing bones. And she got me by the hands and said, come with me, Kenny. And I went down there, and she knelt under a pine tree. You could see that old red sow down there and them little pigs trying to get milk. She couldn't give any. And Mother prayed a prayer, said, Father, you never abandon your children. You gave me these children. You know where you're going to need that meat. And I'm asking you to heal that old sow. And I was listening, you know, and then when she got through, she said, I'm going to stay here a while, Kenny. You run to the house and look up in the safe where we kept milk in big old crocks and pour that cream off in another bowl and take it out and put it in a little pan outside. And I said, why are you doing that? She said, the old sow's going to come up and eat that.
Mm.
Later on in the day, I heard her say, thank the Lord, that old sow come waddling up and ate that milk and cream and eventually grew fat. We had a lot of pork and lard and sausage and stuff. She put feet to her faith, for the old sow was still lying down there. It looked like she was dying. Mother took some action in her belief system. So I grew up with that kind of a thing.
Yeah, and I think you've told me a story before, too, about a Thanksgiving, something to do with a goose.
Yeah. Dad and I were sitting on the front porch of this old farmhouse. He was drinking a cup of coffee. And my mother came to the door, and she said, Bill, all the kids are coming in with their families, and said, I've got plenty of vegetables, but we don't have any meat. But said, I believe the Lord will provide. So she went on back in the house and directed Dad, said, look out across the field there. There's a creek back there. This old lone goose come flying. Dad said, reach inside the door and get the shotgun in my shot sack. That old goose come over and he shot him and fell out in the middle of the road. Mother come to the door and said, thank you, Lord.
That was provision right there.
Yeah. A couple of hospice patients I witnessed to, I remember them real well. One was named Billy Johns, lived on a intercoastal canal, and he was a tank driver in the Korean War. And I don't remember what kind of illness he had, but I'd visited him for 2 or 3 months. He didn't have much to do with faith system or God or anything. His wife was named Kathy. And I would tell him the Lord loved him, you know, and have prayer with him. And I visited him on a Tuesday as my regular routine, visiting that area on Tuesday. Wednesday morning, I got a call from his wife, said, Billy wants to see you. So I took off down there. My wife said, well, you just saw him yesterday. I said, well, I'm going back. And I got to the door, knocked on the door, and I heard him holler, come in. She had said it. She had called me. She had told him she'd call me. He said, sit down by me on the couch here. He said, is there anything to that story you've been telling me about God loves people? And I said, yes, he does. Would he save an old crooked guy like me? I said, in a heartbeat. Mm-hmm. He said, would you ask him to pray, to heal me and to see, not heal me, but to save my soul? I said, no, Billy, I won't ask him. I'll kneel down here by you and support you as you ask him. Mm. And he prayed a prayer. I said, Lord, I've been a wicked old man, and I'm asking you to take the sin from my life and heal me and help me. I know I'm in bad shape, but I want to trust you. Wow. And I want you to forgive my sins as I repent from them. And he died 2 weeks later. I did his funeral out here, buried him out here. Another one was my neighbor across the street. He was anti-church, anti-preacher. He didn't have anything to do. He was in World War II. He was captured in the Battle of the Bulge. You may have heard of that,
Right.
Battle of the Bulge. He was a tank driver, and they took him as prisoners. They took him to the northern part of Germany, put him on farms, on a turnip farm. And he said that they had 4 boxcars full of captured soldiers, and this train was taking them up through France and up to Germany. And he said every night they'd stop the train on the tracks because they'd be strafed by these planes, and they couldn't see ahead if the tracks had been bombed and torn up, so they just parked the train at night and wait till daylight so they could see ahead if the rails had been destroyed by bombs. He said it was a scary time because here we were vulnerable, didn't have any way to look out, said little cracks in them planks. He said every night they'd stop the train, and those German soldiers would set these big smudge pots. They used to see them on the highway they put diesel oil in them, light them, it'd be flares, so you could see at night.
Mm-hmm.
He said they'd set one on each boxcar and said, well, we're going to get away from here and hide in the woods because them planes will come over and going to strafe you, going to kill you guys.
Mm-hmm.
And he said, sure enough, that's what happened. But he said one night they were so fearful because they had heard through these guards that there was going to be a big push to blow all these cars off the tracks. And he said, we were in there just, afraid.
Mm-hmm.
And he said there come a terrible wind storm rocking these cars sitting on the tracks. And I had gone to see him. He lived across the street from me and had a garden out there. And that's when I told my wife, I'm going to talk. They called him a hominy. Hominy? He said, I lived on hominy. That's a corn.
Okay, right.
And so he got the nickname hominy. Anyway, he said that night the guards had locked the doors and run off in the woods and just left them sitting there on a track. And he said they put these smudge pots, one on each of those four cars full of prisoners. Mm. He said, it's a scary time. He said, there come a violent storm. The wind was rocking these boxcars sitting on the track, and the wind was blowing, and the boxcar was just moving from side to side. And he said the wind blew those smudge pots off in a ditch. So the track was up pretty high with sloping banks. And he said those planes come over and strafed those smudge pots. And it didn't hit the train.
Wow.
And I said, Mr. Tips, did you ever think that the Lord was protecting you boys? He said, I never thought of that. Mm. He said, I just had never believed in the Lord. I said, I believe the Lord was protecting you boys and your soldiers. Mm. And he said, I need to get my life right with the Lord. And we had a prayer. He said, Lord, save my soul. And his wife come out, and she said, I want to rededicate my life. So she sat in a chair there in the garden, and we all had prayer together. That was
wow.
Two that I remember really
what a meaningful moment. Yeah, powerful for somebody that's been through so much. Yeah. Just to, we like to we like to think that those people who are really good at talking and nice long prayers have the most powerful words to say, but somebody who's been through something like that just says, Lord, help me. Yeah. That's something of the most powerful things that a person can do. But it seems like a theme kind of in your life has been service, and even though at times not having much, but still giving to God. And I remember there's been a couple occasions at this church where you have kind of given a testimony about giving and what it means to give to God. I don't know if you can recount a little bit of that. There's a couple of different type of givings you've talked about.
There's 4 types as
yeah.
far as I'm concerned.
Right.
There's tipping.
We all do that, right? We all do the tipping. Right?
Tipping and tithing, offering, and sacrificial giving. That's the way I feel about it. You know.
And so, how would you maybe break some of those down? How would you just see a distinction between those?
When I first started going to church, I would tip a couple of bucks, $5 bill, you know. But I went to a church with Ms. Evie Wallace's husband over to Bay City to Calvary Baptist Church. And we had an active brotherhood then, a men's group that met every month. And I was asked to go over and speak to their men. There was about 60 or 70 there. And we had a meal, and then I brought a devotional to them. Billy Hugh was with me. And the preacher said to me, I'm going to be gone 2 weeks from now. Would you come and fill the pulpit for me? And I said, let me think about it. You know, that's the first thing he said. Let me pray about this. Anyway, I called him back and I said, I don't remember his name. I've forgotten it. But he said, have you made your mind up? I said, yes, I don't believe I could do that. He said, why? I said, well, I've been convicted about tithing. And I hadn't been tithing. I've been tipping. He said, I said, but I started tithing a couple of months ago or whatever. And he said, you're the kind of testimony we want. So I went over there and talked to the man and to the church. It was on Sunday morning about how I was convicted about tithing. And it's been a blessing to me to give. And I've been able to do offerings too. I really haven't got to sacrificial giving. I hadn't got to that level yet. That's when you forego buying a car to give to the Lord. Or
yeah, I think you talked about giving when it hurts.
Yes,
you know,
that's right.
Yeah.
Anyway, that's kind of giving I believe in. Not tipping, but tithing and offering and sacrificial giving.
And what do you I feel like in life, the older I get and the more I experience, I realize the growing up, it's always, well, how do we accumulate? You know, how do I take on as much as I can for my own benefit or for those that are close to me? But seeing that there's actually joy in giving.
Yes.
And the mindset of, how do we, it's not wrong to accumulate wealth or to work a job and get paid well, but how to know whose it is. We like to take 100% ownership of everything.
Yes.
But how to have a mind shift that says, wait a minute, this is all a blessing from God.
Yes.
It's 100% His, and how can I be the best steward of it, the best giver to bless others, not only maybe my own family and those around me, but even those that don't have anything and that they're in need, and how to see this as a way to, if God's been such a gift to me and what He's done, how I can extend that to others. And I feel like for me, that's always the reminder I have to have when I'm confronted in a moment.
Yes.
To do I give to this person or do I not?
Yes. Well, I think it's never wrong to give, but I think we need some discernment. I remember when our brotherhood was real active in this church, and WMU too. But we had 60 or 70 men would meet every month, and it was my job to get a speaker, a motivational speaker. I don't know if you ever heard of R.G. Letourneau or not. Up in Tyler, Texas, he was the owner of the world's large machine road building equipment in the world. And he started a college, Letourneau Tech. And he was a wealthy man. And I called him. I never met him, but I'd heard about him, to come and speak to our group. He said, I'd be glad to. Is there a place to land a DC-7 down there? I said, no, there's not an airport around here. Anyway, he told me that in his matter of giving, he said, I used to just tithe, but he said, now I want to keep the tithe and give the 90% to the Lord. And he said, that's what I'm doing.
It's amazing.
Yeah, it is. He was a wealthy man. But anyway, that's a good lesson about tithing.
Yeah. Well, you've been, I think you've touched a lot of people in Sweeney through your giving and your service to them. And what has that been like being a part of public service in this town for the last, I don't know, you did it, 30-something years probably?
Well, I was a councilman 2 years and city manager 25 and mayor 4. That's 31 years. I just feel like that money was never really important to me, to be honest about it, because we never had any. But I felt like public service was the way for me, and I enjoyed it very much.
What are some of the things that you've seen in Sweeney since, 1950-something you've arrived here?
Yes.
Till today,
Well, I remember the first time coming into Sweeney with my wife. She was from a big city of Birmingham, Alabama. And I met her in Beaumont in a ladies' rooming house. Her aunt run his house. Anyway, coming to Sweeney, where the wellness center, not the wellness center, but across from our church or down where that brick building is, that we have the fitness program.
Right.
There was a 2-story wooden frame building there. And then across the street, where the jewelry store used to be, was a Dixie Grill restaurant. And I remember coming down Main Street, and there was a clothesline across the road from that 2-story building that later on was a grocery store. A line stretched across Main Street to the Dixie Grill. There was underwear and shirts and towels and everything else waving in the wind.
You don't see that anymore, do you?
You don't see that anymore.
Yeah, that's how you know you're living in a different time, when you see clothes just flying on Main Street.
And I was working graveyards one night, and there'd been 2 prisoners escaped from the Clemens Dome out here, Clemens Prison Farm. And it was on the radio, they were hunting. They were heading towards Sweeney. And I was on graveyard. My wife was afraid at night. So I had an old shotgun. I loaded up. And I said, honey, I'm going to go out here and sit on the front steps of this apartment on Orange Street. It was a duplex. We lived on one side. Another family lived in the other. Shell Road, going back to a single-car garage. And I said, I'm going to go out and sit on the front porch to give you time to get to sleep. I said, now, if somebody comes up, and prisoners come up, you got a gun here, I was sitting on that steps, waiting on my ride from Old Ocean. And I thought I was going to tell my wife something. I locked the house, so I walked down that shell drive and scratched on the window pane.
Oh, my goodness.
The barrel of that gun looked that big around. I said, hey, it's me. And the next day, she said, I got to call my mother. She said that night, here come a bunch of horses with men on them and hound dogs bawling about, and a bunch of prisoners behind them and other men on horses chasing these 2 guys. They caught them right over here by, off 6th Street.
Wow.
And she said, Mama, you won't believe where Kenneth had bought me. Said he's horsemen, and they all had carrying rifles, and there's dogs howling and bawling.
Different than Birmingham, huh?
Yes.
Yeah. Wow. Well, yeah. I mean, a lot has changed, since then. But yet, still, Sweeney is still a real small community.
At one time here, there was about 8 beer joints. And, they were just here up and down Main Street and off of Main Street. And unfortunately, one of them would bring some women out of Houston on weekends, hang around, and you know what. And a few of us this was 1958, I believe it's 58, got concerned about it. So after church one Sunday, we had a meeting in our church, and they invited some other churches to join us, and we formed what we call a Community Improvement League. We was going to see about getting this beer out of it, because these joints were creating a problem. And I was elected the treasurer, and a member of our church, Bill Paxton, he was an official with Phillips, he was elected president. Bud Heichman was a vice president. In any case, we formed a group, and my job was to go around to all the churches and talk to them about the upcoming election. We'd ask Commissioner's Court to call an election, had to get signatures, and we did, and there was a public election. And the man where the police station is now, before that building was built, it was a white building, it's a frame building. It was a beer joint, and in front of it was an ice house, actually an ice house where you go and chip off a block of ice and take it home. And that guy that owned it, he told my pastor, Andy Pate, he said, if y'all win that election, I'm going to personally whip your behind on the front lawn of the First Baptist Church Sunday morning, because they had the election on Saturday. 84% of the people voted to outlaw.
Wow.
And Evans Lawless and Lee Lawrence and me and Brian Bailey, we went to church early to see that whipping the pastor was going to get, We sat there and he never showed up.
Never showed up, huh? Wow.
Yeah.
84%, that's a pretty heavy majority of
the
the community.
Yeah.
And I think that there's something, I don't know, and I've heard several others say there's a Sweeney way, there's a Sweeney kind of,
I've heard that.
There's a type of, and I'm sure that there's several other small towns in Texas, and across the South that have that kind of close-knit, you grew up, you knew someone's family and their grandparents and played in the yards together. But there is something unique and special about this place, about the fellowship that people have with one another, the Friday night football games, the sports, the school, all the stuff about it. What is something that you've appreciated maybe about this town over the years and the people that are here?
Well, there's several things, but one of the things that when someone gets in a bind, sickness or the house burns or flood, neighbors from all over come and help restore them to get them back to where they were. That's always been a blessing to me to see the community. Of course, I'm sure they do that in other cities too.
Right.
But it's kind of unique to me that see how the community pulls together. I was in a paper a couple of days ago where a house here was donated to a veteran that had some problems, and it showed a picture of him in a fax that they had painted his house, fixed it up, and give it to him.
Wow.
Mortgage free.
What? Wow.
And on Alice Street. And the city has just pulled together in many ways, and we got the hospital going. I helped on that. I served on that board 18 years. 14 as chairman of the board of the hospital, getting doctors in here, building the hospital, building the medical center, and the community came together on that. They said, we want the hospital.
You told me that our hospital was kind of unique in a certain way, especially for being such a small town, that it had to go to some type of election.
Yes. We tried to get with Brazoria and West Columbia and form the West Brazos Hospital District. Now, these three towns are kind of in a triangle. They go out of somewhere in the middle and build a big, nice hospital. And West Columbus, they had 2 or 3 parochial leaders over there said, if one's going to be built, it's going to be built in downtown West Columbia. Well, anyway, we never could get together with them all. And so we decided we would go ahead with the election. And we got the county commissioners to call an election by getting signatures, a petition, and it passed nearly 90%. We want a hospital here. And they sent the result to the Attorney General of the state, and he said, you can't do that. A hospital district that's a taxing unit has to include the whole county. It can't be a portion of a county, like a precinct and here a precinct. So we got a hold of Neil Caldwell, our state senator, and he passed a bill there in Austin that the Constitution of Texas had to be changed to omit that restrictions that you could build in certain districts, you know. So there was election held again, and it was over 80%. So we determined that we wanted the hospital district to be coterminous with the school district. So the hospital district is everything in the Sweeney School District. And that way we got started.
Wow.
And
So you had to go all the way to the state to get a...
Oh, yeah. The Constitution had to be changed, and it was a statewide ballot. People in Dalhart, Dallas, Fort Worth, Clute, everywhere had to vote in a special election to allow a Sweeney Community Hospital to be built in a
They probably didn't know where Sweeney Community
had no
was.
idea. So it was the first one, and then a year later, after we got ours going, Angleton Danbury, it was permissible anywhere the people would vote on it. So they started their petition, and they got that hospital. They were the second one in Texas.
Wow. Wow, what a neat story. It's still going today.
Yeah.
Still going today.
Yeah.
Well, yeah, you've gotten to see and be a part of so many things in Sweeney, you know, with city council and mayor and manager and hospital board and things like that. But it's pretty neat. I got to see, and I would just like to kind of know what you think about that. In 2020, you were nominated as the citizen of the county of the year for the county, Brazoria County. Yeah. What does that mean to you that so many people would look to you as somebody worthy of receiving such an honor of something like that?
Well, I felt there were other people that were more qualified to receive that honor. There's a lot of good things going on in Brazoria County, and I don't remember who nominated me, but I went to the ceremony and they picked another person as I was just an alternate or whatever you want to call it. There was 3 of us that were. One of them was a Citizen of the Year, and the next 2 were runners-up or whatever you want to call it. We got a little plaque and stuff like that. It kind of impressed me this way, that here I've been in public service all these years, and those people liked the job I did and nominated me. It don't always end up that way, you know.
Right.
Run somebody off or politics get involved. I never had any problems, any political problems. Never. I run, for the hospital board 18 years. That would be 9 elections. Then I run for council, and 1 year was 10, and then run for mayor was 2, It's 12 times I run for election and got elected. I respected that, and people having a confidence in me to elect me these offices.
Well, it's an amazing thing. I think anybody who's been around you for a significant amount of time can know that you're not somebody that's been running to grab a power pull in a position or something like that, but because of who you are and what God's done in your life and what you've seen growing up with your family and your parents and even just some of your war experience you've had, and it's kind of molded you and shaped you into somebody that I know a lot of people adore and respect and are thankful for. And I would hope that our church and our community and this nation could raise up many more Kenneth Lotts like you to be great leaders and servants for our society. We need people that have that common respect for others and that common sense of God's given me this ability and this gift to serve others in whatever way He's gifted each individual. And so I'm thankful for that. And what do you maybe hope? Who knows what the next 100 years or 50 years or 10 years are going to look like in this nation. But what are some things that you would hope maybe our society and our culture could regain maybe or could maybe do better going forward?
That's a subject that many people talk about. We talk about it at the fountain. 4 of us men, one is the same age as I, was in Korea while I was. Another one was in Korea in a different capacity than I was, in a combat veteran. We talk about how the culture has changed, how it used to be. Of course, that's kind of old folks stuff, This is the way we did it back then. But I fear for our country. It's easy to say it's because of this or because of that, but I think it started around in the 60s when psychedelic drugs began to come out, and some of the leaders of our university said, hey, it's all right, feels good, do it. And I took God out of our schools, out of our government, really. And it's just strange that this coach that you probably read about up in the state of Washington, after every game, when the game was over, he'd go out in the middle of the field and kneel to have prayer. Well, they fired him over that. Wow. In the Supreme Court here last week. Can't do that. But he did that on his own time, and so they had to. It's things like that that bother me. Here was a story of this little girl in school, and the teacher said, I want y'all to write a paragraph on who's very special to you. And they'd write, well, grandma or grandpa or my parents or my friend. This girl wrote about Jesus, and this teacher wouldn't accept it. Isn't that strange?
Yeah.
I just feel like that we're heading in the wrong direction right now.
Right.
And I've got hope that, Lord, I believe God established this country, and it's the greatest country in the world. All the wars we've been through, we have never, at the end of that war, claimed 1 square foot of their property. The only land we've asked from other countries is room enough to place our dead soldiers in cemeteries. That's the only. Sometime a nation conquers another, and they take that nation in, like Russia's trying to do it in Ukraine now. But all we wanted was a place to bury our dead and then leave. Anyway, I believe there's a remnant of people in this country that we don't hear from, that are made up of men and women, just want to live their lives, to go to work, provide a home, a quality of life for their children, see them graduate from school, and grow up to be productive citizens. I believe the majority of Americans are like that.
Yeah.
We hear about the other side.
Oh, that's right.
And that's all else.
I think Paul said something about that, and he
Yes.
encourages you to live a quiet life,
Right.
And I feel like and one reason why I kind of want to do this is because there are so many people that are, I think it is the majority that live this life, just average
Yes.
citizens like you and like me that don't make the news, aren't on all the tabloids or whatever the headlines are, That's the majority, and we have this common experience together. And I think a lot of us have a common hope, longing that things would be put right, things would be would be done well and done right, and so and that's a hope, even if things are, if people think that things are trending the wrong way. I feel like there's still some sort of hope that we as a people can turn around and turn back to God and have Him heal our ways that we've been doing things.
It's my belief that young people are going to change this nation. My age group is not going to be able to do much about it, but I believe there's a lot of young people that want something more authentic than what they've got.
I think you're right. Yeah.
And they're the one that can make the changes. And I believe in the youth of this country. It's so sad that some of the shootings and things like that happen, but I think that our revival is going to come when our whole nation turns to the Lord and say, Lord, we're going down the wrong path. And I believe the youth are going to lead it. I really believe that. I got one other little story. When I came back from service, I had a hard time sleeping, and I had a lot of nightmares. And I wouldn't sleep in the bed with my wife. I slept on the floor on a quilt. I didn't want nobody to touch me. I'd have these wild, crazy nightmares. Anyway, our church sent a group to Baylor University, to the Baptist General Convention of Texas, and they met 8,000 of them from all over Texas in the gymnasium there in Baylor. And our pastor went, Gerald and his wife, and Joe and I, and Jim Howard and his wife, and seemed like another couple, went in the van and to this 3-day convention. And Billy G. from Korea pastored the largest Baptist church in the world at that time. He was to be the featured speaker. Of course, there was other business. The convention had to take care of this, who was going to be president of the convention and so forth. Well, the featured speaker was Billy G. And he got to talking about his church. He said it never closes doors. 24 hours a day, the church is open. He said people flocking in all over Korea. Korea, at the end of World War II, was under Japanese control. And they closed the churches. And then after the World War II ended, the churches opened back up in Korea. And he said, I went to church with my grandparents. And my dad and mother didn't go much. He said, then the communists come, that's why we got in the war. And they closed all the churches. And the people were just lamenting, their church was closed. And he says, then they got a new Chinese leader, a military man. He said, we're going to let y'all open up the churches. He said, they opened up this church in Seoul. And my grandparents and my aunt and my sister went, but I was sick, and so I stayed home. He said, the word got out over this Seoul, that's the capital of Korea, that church is going to be open by the Chinese that were trying to push Americans out. He said my grandfather and grandmother and other family members went to that church, and it was just packed. He said when they got in there, a Chinese soldier locked the door, and they set the building on fire. And I lost my grandmother, grandfather, and an aunt, and somebody else. But he was telling that in his sermon, you know. He said, by the way, if there's any Korean veterans here, please stand up. And there was 2 or 3 here, 1 or 2 were there. I didn't stand up. My wife said, stand up. I said, no, I don't. Yeah, go ahead and stand. I did. And he said, I want to thank you for the freedom you brought to us.
Wow.
He said, now I have the ability to pastor the largest church, 32,000 and a few hundred members.
Wow.
And I started sort of crying. My wife said, what's the matter? I said, I had asked all these years in my own mind, Lord, what happened good from that war? Why did all these 37,422 young men that'll forever be in my mind, 18, 19, 20 years old, never knew what it was to play baseball with their kids or walk a daughter down the aisle or, you know, have grandchildren? I had a survivor's guilt type thing, you know. Why did I? And what good come out of that? And when he said that, I began to kind of cry. My wife said, what's the matter? I said, I believe the Lord is healing me. Answer my questions. From then on, I've never had a bad dream.
Yeah. Wow. It kind of gave you a purpose for why you did what you did, and you saw a tangible, a positive aftermath that came from that.
Right.
You know, I can't imagine how many other soldiers think that those same thoughts, those same questions, have nightmares.
Yeah. Well, anyway, I haven't had any since then.
Yeah. Well, praise God. That's an awesome testimony to that. Well, I just kind of want to, you know, just a couple more things I'd be curious to know. One being you motivate me, and you know, even Casey being here just for a short time, he's gotten to see you and many other people, and how you still have purpose and meaning and value in life. And you know, for many people, they would see somebody that maybe just look from the outside looking in at your circumstance. Well, you're living in a assisted living place. You know, you've been a widow for almost a decade now. It'd be very easy to just give up. God, just take me, you know. But every day when I see you, you're up, you're going, you're whistling, you're talking with people. What gives you that sense of motivation each day to take it all in stride and to keep going, even though 92 years old, and you put some of us young people to shame by how much you're still going and doing and loving life. And not that you don't have any bad days, we all do, but what is some of that motivation you have?
Well, this is the day the Lord has made. Be sad in it. No, I said be glad and rejoice.
Right.
And I've tried to follow. That's a good scripture.
Well, I think you've modeled that very well for.
Well, I'm limited in what I can do now.
Right.
It hurt me to give up the hospital visits. Of course, it's quite different from hospice, and you probably know about hospice, where you go and be with a family maybe 2 or 3 months. You get to know all their stories and all. But in a hospital visit, you see them one time. And generally one time. Sometimes you see them twice, but most of the time they're in there for tests or surgery. And I see them once a week, and then they're gone. So it's a different type of ministry. But it's valuable, I think, not because I do it, because others do it too. I'm an optimist. I look on they used to sing an old song in church, look on the sunny side, always on the sunny side. Look on the sunny side of life. It will cheer you every day. help you along the way. Keep on the sunny side of life. Life's been good to me. I've had a good life. And I know that I'm not going to live forever here, but I'll live forever there.
That's right. Amen. That's right.
I see some of my siblings, my wife, my parents. Like I say, I'm the last survivor of 11 children. And I said it often, I'm the last coon up the tree.
Well, you're still here and you're still kicking and full of life, and I'm been so thankful to get to know you and to live life with you. And
well, I want to be honest about my Christian life. I started following the Lord, involved in a lot of things in the church, treasurer, president of Brotherhood, taught Sunday school, taught John Ed and Kenneth Sexton, Charlie Stevenson when they were just little toddlers, you know. My life then, I began to drift off, give up teaching, and I'd say I let the world enter into me again, partially. I had guilty conscience about it, but then eventually I came back and I said, that's not who I am. That's not honoring the Lord, and I confessed. I came back to church. I never did drop out of church.
Right.
I mean, I come back to a relationship with the Lord, and the story of the prodigal son seemed to fit me pretty well, you know. And it's a story of hope that a loving father, during this time, that young man had broken fellowship with the Lord, but not relationship. You know, he was still his father's son. And anyway, that was back in the 70s, and a while back. 50 years ago. You weren't here then.
I wasn't around then. Yeah, I know.
I'm so thankful now that my daughter's here. All my children are here in this area now. And that's very pleasing to a father to have his children around. And we went out the other day. Well, in fact, it had been a Saturday night to El Tarapi's. Basic food. Anything else?
No, that's it. And I'm just thank you for coming in and sharing about your life and your experiences and our hope for tomorrow, for today, and just to also, what a great day to do it on 4th of July, and just remember a little bit about all the good things that God has blessed us with and this world with.
Well, you know, I've had fun in my life, but I'll have to say the war changed me. Before I was in service, a newspaper, I'd only look at the funny papers, the comics.
Right.
Since then, I've never looked at a comic before. Life had become more focused. Or I hadn't, what we call them funnies, you know, but they're comics, and I don't look at them anymore. Life is not, it just changed me. I guess I grew up that night over there.
That's right. Something like that will make anybody grow up in a situation like that. But
anything else?
That's it. No, thank you so much
You're welcome.
for coming and sitting down.
Sorry I took your time up.
No, I took your time up. You blessed me with it. So